Mr. Chair, I will claim as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise to offer the amendment number 36 to H.R. 585, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act. My amendment would ensure that campus faculty is trained to recognize victims of sexual or domestic violence, and specifically, the legislation amends the bill to include appropriate campus faculty such as academic advisors or professionals who deal with students on a daily basis for grant training programs to recognize and respond to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. This would include training health providers on how to provide universal education to all members of the campus community on the impacts of violence on health and unhealthy relationships and how providers can support ongoing outreach relationships. Now, going off to school can be a wonderful opportunity for our children, but sexual and domestic violence on college campuses is horrific and must be addressed. We know that of undergraduate students, 23.1% of females and 5.4% of males experience rape or sexual assault during their time on campus. But all too often, those students do not report to law enforcement. Only 20% of female student victims report their experience. Now, some don't report because they fear reprisal. Others, maybe they don't think it was important enough, and some maybe don't believe that police could or would do anything to help. We cannot eradicate sexual violence on campus if we can't even reach the students who are being impacted. We're failing them. That's why this amendment to include campus faculty in the training programs to help them identify signs of sexual and domestic violence is so necessary. If students feel that they cannot report these crimes, we must have knowledgeable and trained faculty in place to help if it's needed. Now, recently, I went to a panel at Benedictine University in Lisle, Illinois, and I got to hear from campus faculty about this specific issue and from students on the unique needs on college campuses. There are really specific challenges, and as Congresswoman Underwood was mentioning, we have limited but flawed procedures in place for people who need shelter when they're victims of domestic violence. That's really hard on a college campus. What do you do to someone when they're in the dorm room and everybody knows where the dorms are on campus? What do you do to change their schedule if there's only one section of the class you need to take? What can schools do when a survivor doesn't feel safe to go to class? I was honored at the time to speak with Bernadette Molosky, Benedictine's Violence Against Women Act grant coordinator, and she pointed out that when schools provide more information and resources for reporting and speaking openly about these issues, it often leads to higher numbers of reports, not because violence is happening more often, but because people finally feel safe to come forward. Now, it is so important for the first person that a student confides in to have an appropriate reaction, because that disclosure often has a huge impact on the survivor's healing. It's also impactful on how the student decides to move forward, either in reporting or seeking additional assistance, such as counseling and support. So if the first person does not respond with empathy or gives an indication that they don't care or maybe doesn't know what to do, doesn't know where the resources are on campus, the student may never tell another person, may struggle with that, and the perpetrator may go on to commit more violence. On college campuses, students often develop mentor relationships with faculty or staff beyond the health department who they're working with, and it is more likely that a survivor will disclose their experience to someone they know as opposed to a stranger. That's why we have to get this right. This amendment would provide the resources to train all of those faculty who interact with students, and by providing resources to schools can individualize their response to sexual and domestic violence, we will enable them to better meet the unique challenges of those students. This is particularly true for underserved communities, and coordinated, comprehensive responses will allow college communities to develop sustainable strategies to address these crimes. For colleges and universities to curb sexual violence on campus, we must create the safe, respectful, collegiate learning and teaching environment that every student and employee deserves. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, which will not only provide resources for college and university faculty, but also the support that students need and deserve. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. Does any member ask time? The gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you to Representative Bass for authoring this bill. Thank you for all the tireless advocates that have worked to bring here for this day. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and please support this bill.